Anyway, great to have you here as we kick off another round of broadcast excellence, 3 straight hours. Great to have you with us, as always. The telephone number, if you want to be on the program, is 800-282-2882, and the email address, lrushbo@eibnet.com. We hear a lot, ladies and gentlemen, about how Donald Trump. Oh, speaking of which, the New York Times is back. What did we have the New York Times yesterday that they totally didn't understand, what they got wrong? Something they were late arriving, just didn't figure. I can't remember what it is, but they're back. The New York Times has a story today how the Republican elite lost its voters to Donald Trump, and they still don't get it. You know what they think it is? The New York Times thinks that the Republican Party message of trickle-down economics, tax cuts for the rich, anti-abortion, they think that is why Republican voters are abandoning the Republican Party for Donald Trump. Now, that may be, it may be the fact that that's so out of touch with people today, but that's not why people are abandoning the Republican Party for anybody else. It's not why it's not why Bernie Sanders' people are abandoning the. The point is, the New York Times is part of the establishment, and they don't get it. They do not understand what it is. Even Nicholas Kristof, who is a columnist at the New York Times, has written one of the many mistakes the media has made in this campaign. What everybody's going through now in the drive-by media, the entire establishment, they're all wringing their hands. And they're asking themselves, what has happened to our politics? Why is everything so mean? Why is there such incivility? Why are there so many arguments? Why is there so much anger? They're going nuts trying to figure it out. Because again, and do not discount this, where they live, everything's fine, folks. Their schools are good. Their incomes are solid and rising. The unemployment where they live, if we're talking Washington, D.C. and its immediate surroundings, is under 4%, a real under 4%. I keep reading that 5 of the 7 wealthiest counties in America now are those counties surrounding Washington, D.C. So if you factor in New York and the upper crust of the New York economy, of which several establishment members are members and where they live, everything's fine where they live. And it's amazing, they're journalists and other professions, of course. The lack of curiosity has always amazed me. I would think curiosity would be a primary requirement, an ingredient necessary to do the job. But when people reject them, when voters vote against what they believe in, they're perplexed. They don't get it. And rather than make an effort to understand it, they just put down or criticize or impugn voters as being stupid or barbaric or uncivil or inhumane or what have you. But there is never any introspection. And with a lack of introspection, there is the constant assumption that life in America is pretty much like it is in their neighborhoods, in their cities where they live. And that's why I say the disconnect, the degree to which our betters, which is how they think of themselves, our leaders, are out of touch. It's just, I think it would shock even those of you who are aware of and agree with the premise that there's this giant disconnect. I think you'd be shocked at how big it is. And the lack of curiosity. They're out there trying to figure out what Trump's all about. Trump's been in this race since June, and they still don't get it. And they're still struggling, trying to understand it, and they don't. And they think they do now. They keep coming up with explanations that satisfy themselves, but those explanations never involve them. It's always somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's stupidity. It's always the voters are rabid. It's anything but them. And the New York Times, with this piece today, they are further away from understanding. I wouldn't even call it the cause of Trump's popularity. It's bigger than Trump's popularity. They are further away from understanding why an increasing number of people distrust, have no faith in leadership in Washington. They as they struggle to explain this to themselves, they get further and further away from the truth. Now, I was mentioning Nicholas Kristof. He's a columnist at the New York Times, and he's one of these hand wringers, wringing their hands, trying to what did we miss? What's going on? How do we? And one of the things that he concluded is, and he's right, is that journalists have not ventured out of their little cocoon, the bubble in which they live, and they've not traveled to places where all of this angst, unhappiness, anger, whatever anxiety is, they have not gone to see it. They haven't gone to report on it. They have viewed it from afar in Washington. They comment on it. They characterize it, but they have never delved and stepped into it. That's why I've always joked that drive-by media reporters need visas, to get into Iowa and Missouri and Ohio and so forth. Now you're saying, but Rush, they were just there during the primary. Yeah, they were just there during the primaries, but even in that circumstance, their focus is very narrow on the election horse race. And everything happens under the biases and the premises they take with them as they travel to report on these places. They don't go in with empty brains waiting to be filled with information based on what they find. They set out with stories written, preconceptions logged, and they go out and try to find proof of what they think they believe. And if they don't, then they chalk it up to some abnormality in the electorate or some abnormality in polling data or some such thing. But they are now seriously questioning why. I tell you what this boils down to. They're asking themselves, how did we miss this? Why didn't we take Trump's candidacy seriously? And then they are concluding they haven't gotten out enough. And they haven't gone and witnessed. But this New York Times story today, it's kind of laughable. And then when they start handing out blame for what's going on, when believe me, the lives they live and the places they live, everything is fine. It's Ozzie and Harriet days for them. Well, take it not Ozzie and Harriet days. It's Heather has two mommies and all that, and everything's normal and just happy as everybody can be. Their only problem is that Republicans live near them, but they've got them under control pretty much. But really, life is good at the establishment. Life is good in Washington. I mean, that's where all the money is. I remembered what it was. Yesterday, the New York Times had a story claiming they couldn't find anything in common with terrorists. They couldn't, there was nothing that they could find that could help anybody to understand who might be a terrorist, who might become a terrorist. So that was yesterday. Today, the New York Times, how the GOP elite lost its voters to Donald Trump. And they're so far off. All they've got to do is listen to me. I've been telling people for 5 months why this is happening.